We all know the saying.
I'm Sonic. Sonic the Hedgehog.
I'm Sonic the Hedgehog. I'm Sonic. Sonic the Hedgehog. I told you, I'm not a rat. I'm a hedgehog.
But why does he introduce himself like that? Why does anyone in this universe introduce themselves like that? Is the and their animal type part of a legal name, or is putting those two after your given name just something to do in this franchise? I go by the name Jiggy. If you're new here, welcome. Been here a while? Glad you stuck around. Let's talk naming conventions in Sonic. A naming convention is a set of agreed upon rules for naming things to ensure consistency, clarity, and ease of understanding. With the exception of quite a few Archie comic book characters and the glorious Dr. Ivo Robotnik, just about every character known in the Sonic franchise goes by blank, the animal name. Why is that? Looking at this from an in-game perspective, there isn't any need for these characters to justify the type of animal that they are. The humans in this universe, whenever they're deemed acceptable to have, are very obviously knowledgeable on the subject of mammals. It's part of the whole reason why they confused Sonic with Shadow, why Knuckles is called out in that one section of Glyphic Canyon in Shadow the Hedgehog,
Ready, Kidna sighted.
and why Eggman has referred to Tails as Fox Boy even though he's the only Sonic character not to follow the aforementioned naming format. So, if it's not like these guys are named for the sake of non-animals, then what's the point? Why does it matter if you're Sonic, Shadow, or Silver the Hedgehog, Rouge the Bat, or Blaze the Cat? Well, it's a subtle way of teaching the player what to expect from these characters. You know that chameleons have the ability to camouflage themselves if they get too startled. You understand that bees will attack if they're agitated. And although hedgehogs aren't super fast by any means, can't control time-space within a limited vicinity, and definitely don't have the ability to lift boxes with their mind, you know for a fact that they can still roll into a ball. If there's one of the many things I can say that this series does well, it's using haha funny animals to teach you about real-world concepts and phenomena. The industrialization versus nature debate is an obvious one, but the fact that a crocodile will dead-ass death roll you if given the chance to is absolutely hilarious if you sit with it for long enough. Like, look at this, in comparison to this, and tell me you wouldn't rather complete the Doom or Lost Impact from Shadow 05 multiple times over instead of having to survive the latter. Naming these characters the way they have been for the past 30 years plus has been programming us and we didn't even realize it. Take Team Sonic for example. Sonic, the Hedgehog, see what I did there, is the fastest quoted on the team, but Tails could in a real world scenario easily outpace him given that he's a fox. However, foxes are generally shy creatures in the wild though, and prefer to stalk their prey. Thus, it makes sense that he'd follow Sonic. Then you have Knuckles, the echidna, who by design are very solitary animals that prefer to keep to themselves. Each of the members accurately fit the descriptors for the most part as well. Knuckles being the biggest for this case since the echidnas usually burrow in the ground to make their home. Taking into account that the purpose of Sonic games is often to drive home a message of some kind, you'll find rather soon that this isn't strictly the story alone. Consequently though, if every duplicate animal that we have was the same, then it'd be boring. It's why you have stark differences between the most populated species of the franchise, hedgehogs. Sonic, Shadow, and Silver may all have similar traits, but are by no means the same person. Their naming conventions come more so from their given first names rather than the subclass of mammal they are. The supersonic hedgehog always willing to showcase his true potential to run at the speed of sound. Maria, everyone's bestie, said it best, "Shadows show you where the light is," and named him just for that as he was to be the guiding light towards a potential cure for her disease. Silver can be interpreted as the silver-lined cloud in a dark situation, considering the many ruined futures he's experienced. There's also Amy, but her and a couple of other notable names we'll get to soon enough are a special case. You have a few other obvious instances like Blaze being a cat that is more independent, Rouge, who incorporates all of the sneaky traits of her species by being able to fly silently when necessary and steal food, or in this case gems, from other bats or people, and then Cream falling in line with a rabbit's tendency to squabble up only when faced with a perceived danger. You can't forget the Babylon Row guest stars as well that can always be seen flying high above everyone else. Jet the Hawk, Wave the Swallow, and Storm the Albatross. Those three are all about swooping in to steal treasure, prove they're the fastest, and then some. We have to take into account though that not every single character in existence has followed the same formula. I alluded to it already, but some folks have full first and last names that help dig deeper into their purpose without having to commit several roundabouts to figure things out. Sonic unironically fits into both categories, but you'll have to wait to find out how so. People like Amy Rose fit into a special box as a result of the names being directly related to their personality traits versus what they stand for. A rose, specifically a red one since that's the image most conjured mentally when the word appears, is a symbol of love, devotion, and passion. Amy is pretty much the walking example of this with her unrelenting love for Sonic and desire to spread positivity. But let's take it a step further. Being the Dynamite, yeah, that's a deep cut for some folks, is another example. Looking at the avian class citizen, you can tell from the build that he's supposed to be some kind of duck, but there's nothing exciting about ducks. We gotta make it so he has this weird affinity for bombs and can control explosions, all the while using that to tie into why he's a little cuckoo. Someone who has a bit more going up there though is Princess Sally Acorn. A squirrel chipmunk type of gal in case you couldn't tell by the last name, and her role as a princess is dictated by such. Not the squirrel part, that's just a coincidence. I'm talking about the last name. The Kingdom of Acorn being the dead giveaway that she's part royalty, hence the full legal name. In this instance, a character such as Sally requires a bit of context if you've never tapped into the Archie comics, but for the sake of the video, we're going to leave it as her name precedes her and why the Acorn family is a central focus for that comic run. You also have characters like Tails that I mentioned earlier though that don't fall into the formula of name the animal, as his full name is Miles Prower, with Tails being a nickname given to him by Sonic presumably. Or Belle the Tinkerer, where her being a robot that, well, tinkers with things are due to the word being a verb, a descriptor of what she does. Speaking of robots, there's Omega, General, and Emerald that were either given names in the case of the latter two, or in Omega's case, the series of robot that he is. What makes not just these guys, but everyone that fits into this category a tad more interesting is that there's more going in to discover the meaning behind why they're named this way. Make a quick U-turn back to Omega. In the Greek alphabet, Alpha is the beginning and Omega is the end. Seeing as Omega, the Sonic character, is the last E-series robot and the strongest of all his siblings, help decipher this fact. Sure, both he and the manuals or character profiles found in the games will tell you this, but for anyone that's ever been even remotely interested in learning about other cultures, this was probably a Leonardo DiCaprio moment for them. Similar ways of thinking can also be applied to Emerald and General too. Sonic gave Emerald his name since he had no clue where the robot came from, and this, in tandem with the robot straight up demanding a Chaos Emerald, probably, led to a name being chosen that resembled the mysterious gems. For General, it's less exciting since he took Emerald's framework and looks identical to him. Rosie the Rascal, Amy's original name, alter ego person, is also a thing however, and this one's a bit more on the nose since her whole shtick is told to you flatly. She's here to be a little whimsical is all. But where did this emphasis on naming the characters to closely align with their traits stem from though? If you're asking me, it took about 30 years after the inception of Sonic to kickstart. You could argue that Sonic was the premier of this using your name to tell folks who you are and what you do, song and dance. The same could be said for Eggman. I mean, Ivor Robotnik is a pretty unique name and just sounds smart upon hearing it for the first time. One could even say Tails since his quirk is having two tails and being able to fly, but his real name being Miles Per Hour precedes this. Miles Per Hour sounds a lot like miles per hour, yeah, but before he knew that rotating his tails could result in speed to keep up with Sonic, tech was his thing. All of those, which are indeed nice I might add, are notions that I would disagree with though. In game, the only person to have their full name front and center in some capacity is Knuckles the Echidna, abbreviated to KTE as to not bombard the screen with too much information. The Echidna starts off as an antagonist to Sonic and Tails, and they're not on familiar terms as of yet to have given him the Knux nickname. Chalking up Knuckles' ability to utilize shortcuts due to being an Angel Island native is cool, but also has to do with his species once again. Echidnas have a very keen sense of smell as well, which would aid in explaining those times that Knux is always seemingly one step ahead of Sonic. Also, I just found out, but apparently these animals are highly sensitive to electrical stimuli? God, I love how accurate this series is. I know some of you may be going in and thinking about the whole Amy Rose or Rosie the Rascal thing since CD came out before Sonic 3 and Knuckles, but I take that and raise you a, she was called Princess Sally Acorn in the manual and with no regard to correct it until damn near the 2000s. Anywho, By the way, Sonic's now non-canon name is Ogilvie Maurice Hedgehog for anyone that didn't notice the chapter names. Crazy to think that my goat was holding on to that for so long. I want to know what you all think about this naming convention thing. What does your favorite character's name mean to you, and do you think Sonic Team does a good job at having that ideology present throughout the character's actions? By the way, when you're watching this, I'm probably live streaming on both YouTube and Twitch, so be sure to stop by and say hello. And feel free to follow me over on Twitter since I'm trying to diversify where we can conversate. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.